the issue of land, that is very regulated. I have had an opportunity also to handle land disputes in the country. So I understand that is very organized, not to take defense, but to speak from my own experience and knowledge, how the issues of land conflicts and land ownership are handled from village levels to the High Court, Court of Appeal levels. Is very, very organized. But I am mindful of your point that you're talking about the bottom-up strategy, where you actually have committees at village levels that handle issues of environment. And then, yeah, I think that's about it. Behavioral change, you're speaking of the importance of people who are aware and who are mindful of their behavior, you know, apart from the legislation that is there, to be mindful of maybe key issues of climate change. But as you've connected it, people have to have knowledge. So awareness has to be brought about in the communities. I repeated myself, but I think that's about it from your contribution. Thank you for that contribution. Since you've responded to Isakwisa's presentation, may I also take this opportunity to invite members from the floor to either contribute to what the panelists have discussed or ask questions and contribute to the presentations that we've had throughout the afternoon. As we started from session 4, I understand we've had about 4 presentations from Engineer Ladislaus on the roadmap towards addressing climate change in the region, having a common regional protocol to address climate change, and the fact that Kenya is ahead. It's always ahead when it comes to legislation. And then a presentation from Isakwisa on priorities for climate change in the country from Tanzania. We've had Selina Lee's very informative, detailed presentation also on climate transitioning for mining communities. And then, of course, we were given some priority areas by Ms. Jennifer when it comes to seed programs. So anyone who has any, would like to respond, to comment, to contribute in terms of the 4 presentations that we have had in the course of the day, kindly just put your hand up and feel free to contribute. I'm sure by now our food has digested enough, and so have the materials. And I already have a hand. Baraka? Okay, karibu. We have about 15 minutes to do this.
Mimi ninashukuru na nitazungumza kwa Kiswahili kwa niaba ya wanafunzi wangu hapa ili niwatendee haki pia. Maana kuongea nao Kizungu kilikuja na merikebu enzi za zamani sana, lakini sio mbaya. Ninawashukuru presenter wote ambao mmepresent hasa kwenye climate change. Mimi nitatoa mtazamo wa jumla kwa sababu naamini kwamba wakati mradi wa seed unaanza, climate change haikuwa issue ambayo ilikuwa ni kubwa, na ndio maana tutaona waliochangia kutoa success stories hawakugusia story yote inayohusu climate change, kwa sababu nafikiri haikuwa focus. Lakini kwa sababu climate transition ni kitu cha muhimu na tuna interest tukizungumza na kuona kwamba serikali ya Canada au wafadhili wanaweza kuona namna gani ya kupata na TLS kwa ajili ya kuhakikisha kwamba kuna mjadala mkubwa na namna gani kazi zinaweza zikafanyika hapo. Ni kweli kwamba kwa Tanzania kama Isakwisa alivyosema, kuna sheria, kuna miongozo na kila kitu. Lakini nadhani tunapaswa kuangalia, kwa kusoma kwangu sheria ya mazingira ya mwaka 2008 nimegundua kwamba kuna kifungu kimoja tu kinachozungumzia climate change. Kifungu cha 75 tu cha sheria ya mazingira. Kwa hiyo unaweza ukaona kwamba hata sheria yetu ya mazingira pamoja ni kwamba ni nzuri, lakini swala la climate mabadiliko ya tabia nchi halijaelezwa kwa uzuri, japokuwa kuna mikakati ambayo imetokana na ambao kama Isakwisa alivyotuambia. Kwa hiyo sisi kama wadau wa sekta ya uziduaji tunatamani kuona kwamba kwa sababu hii sekta ni pana na ina mambo mengi, na tunataka kuona kwamba imewekewa msingi mzuri wa kisheria na kisera kwa maana ya climate change. Kama watu walivyosema wengine kwamba kwenye sheria tuko vizuri, lakini utekelezaji unakuwa ni changamoto. Kitu cha pili, wito wangu ni kwamba ndugu Isakwisa pia ametuambia kwamba kwenye inapokuja swala la climate financing ni changamoto. Sasa unaweza kuona kwamba tunajiuliza, tuna sera, tuna sheria, tuna mikakati, lakini kama hatuna fedha za kuitekeleza, maana yake ni kama hatufanyi chochote. Kwa hiyo bado pia tunaona kwamba kuna haja ya kuwa tunapofanya climate transitioning tunakuwa pia tunajitahidi sana kuwekeza fedha, aidha kama kwenye partnership waliozungumzia private sector na serikali, kuhakikisha kwamba tunakuwa na fedha za kutekeleza mipango tuliyojiwekea kwa ajili ya kuhakikisha kwamba tunaokoa sasa huyu mwanamke ambaye tumeona kwamba kwenye sekta ya uziduaji ndiye anayeathirika zaidi na mabadiliko ya tabia nchi kuliko mwanaume, sababu yeye anabaki pale kama athari zimetokea, kwa hiyo zinakuwa zinamkumba yeye zaidi na watoto. Kwa hiyo hilo ni eneo jingine ambalo nilikuwa naliona kwamba ni la msingi zaidi sana ambalo tunaweza tukaliangalia. Lakini tunashukuru pia jitihada za Jumuiya ya Afrika Mashariki kwamba inataka tuwe na sera ya mabadiliko ya tabia nchi, lakini wao wanapotutungia sera basi wahakikisha kwamba kuna climate financing mechanism iwepo. Wasitupe tu sera tunakutaka tu harmonize, watupe pia na utaratibu wa kupata fedha kwa ajili ya kutekeleza mikakati itakayotuhakikisha kwamba tunaokoa mabadiliko ya tabia nchi kwa ajili ya kutunza kizazi kilichopo na kizazi cha baadaye. Kwa maana tunajua kwamba uziduaji unaathiri pia au unachangia katika mabadiliko ya tabia nchi. Kwa sisi interest yetu kama wadau ni uziduaji, lakini tunajua mabadiliko ya tabia nchi ni cross cutting, inaenda katika mambo mengi. Lakini sisi tutakuwa tunaiangalia katika engo ya uziduaji ambao ndio shabaha yetu kubwa ambayo iko hapa. Tofauti na hapo, nawashukuru na mjadala umekuwa mzuri, na natumai baadhi ya mchango wangu utazingatiwa na Nelson na wadau kubwa ambao wametufanya tuko hapa leo.
Asante sana. Oh, this is good. I have about 3 hands. I don't know who to start with. Okay, madam, I don't remember your name, but please take the floor. And then I'll come to you, Isakwisa, and then I'll be back to you, sir.
Naitwa Rachel. Asante.
Karibu Rachel.
Napenda kutoa pongezi kwa watu wa mada wote, hususan kwenye mjadala mpya ambao tunauongelea mabadiliko ya tabia nchi, mazingira pamoja na masuala ya gender. I think, to be honest, from my side, I've missed a discussion on how we link the question of climate change, energy transition and gender in the focus of the extractive sector, particularly mining. This is something I've not had coming across, but I think it should be food for thought for all of us, as now when you talk about climate change, energy transition and gender-related issues, this is something that is very new for Tanzania. And learning from the last COP meeting, it's something that was strongly discussed. So while energy transition is technically visible or economically beneficial, risks are there, you know, and it cannot happen by itself. So as my colleague previously said, a policy, practice and institutional action is needed to ensure that we steer the discussion around sustainable development. However, when you talk about energy transition and climate change, right now, more focus is on the banning of fossil fuels. You know, it's not. I don't think, or I stand to be corrected. I don't think much is being addressed on issues of, let's say, deforestation. It's more looking at banning of fossil fuels and the extent to which carbon might be reduced by year come 2030 or 2050, if I'm not mistaken. So, we as Haki Rasilimali, we did some sort of contextual analysis on the subject matter. And we came to realize that you cannot talk about climate change, energy transition, without looking at the impact of Tanzania as a developing country. That is relying more now, a friend from the Ministry of Mine will tell me that, more focus in order to power the 2025 vision. We are supposed to tap into natural resources, making use of natural resources so that you can power our industrialization agenda by 2025. What does that mean? more focus is being given on production of fossil fuels. For instance, we're talking about coal mining. We have Liganga and Chichuma projects, yeah, that the government under the Ministry of Minerals is making that as a priority. But we're also talking about extraction of uranium, the Mkojo River project. These are critical minerals, yeah, that we don't, as a country, we are thinking that investing into that, among other critical minerals, will be able to power our industries. So, what does this mean to link with climate change? What is the impact of development discourse that Tanzania is foreseeing in addressing issues of climate change and energy transition? I think for me that is the biggest question. The agenda of banning of fossil fuels is coming from the global north or global south? How do you call it? Global north. But what does that mean for developing countries like Tanzania that is pushing to extract its resources as a mean for an enhanced development? This is something that we need to look at. A cost-benefit analysis, I think, is required to ensure that while the world is busy talking about climate change, energy transition, but we're also looking at our development priorities. Where do we position Tanzania in the global agenda? What does that mean in terms of economical development, community development, livelihood improvement, among others? Yeah? And believe me, the agenda is moving faster than we thought, yeah? It's really moving very fast. But again, there's the question of renewables. Tanzania as a country is well endowed with other sources, minus the non-renewables. How do we tap from the solar? How do we tap from the other renewable energies? Wind and solar capacity is expected to overgrow oil and gas by 2024. Yeah? While we have countries now who are pushing for electrical cars or petrol cars, banning of the petrol cars. Yeah? All these have to be factored. I feel there's limited research for Tanzania to combine the two. And how do we now, as a country, set priorities under, let's say, the Vice President office? Set priorities to address for the same. We need development, but we cannot also live as an island. So this is something I'm leaving it for us as food for thought. Yeah? As I said, we need to rethink the priorities for the country vis-a-vis critical minerals and issues of energy transition, and how does that mean for developing countries like Tanzania. So this is very critical. Cost-benefit analysis, we need it. Because we have to be as realistic as possible to ensure that as developing countries are not losing, but at the same time to have to ensure that we are also part and parcel of the global movement. Secondly, it's a good move to hear from initiatives from no, but coming back again to Tanzania, I think we are lacking the policy and legal framework to address issues of energy transition. Maybe TLS and other stakeholders, we could again find space with the Vice President Office environment to try and negotiate mechanisms on which we can again make a review of our policy framework. Yeah, as Barak already said, there's very limited issues that have been addressed in terms of climate change and extractives on our laws. So there's a gap already. Let us find space to discuss about it. What can work in terms of any amendments to be thought of. Again, for the East Africa, it's a good move to see that we have discussions around East Africa mining. But again, looking at the countries within East Africa, I think the agenda of mining is not a cross-border issue. If I'm not mistaken. Again, countries discuss mining as independent. It's not a joint issue. We as civil society, we try to push for a bill, a mining bill. I think it was in 2018 or 2019. I was informed that it's still under the shelves. It is not something that countries wanted to adopt at the IALA level. So, looking at the fact that now we are looking at establishing smelting centers or discussion on policy around mining value addition, I think we have first to have a specific bill that will cut across the need to have a mining act at the regional level. I'm saying this because each country is unique in terms of its mining sector. So the fact that we have no regional bill, regional act on the mining, we should have started there. But the concern on smelting, again, Tanzania now has 2 smelters, if I'm not mistaken, Kiongozi. We have 2 smelters, yeah? We have 2 smelters. Rwanda has also 1. How do we, at the East African level, this is a question, try to harmonize country efforts, for instance, on the establishment of smelters? What are we trying to look at? Should we establish a regional smelting facilities? What do we learn, or what do we tap from the smelting facilities that Tanzania, Rwanda already has? Because that could be a case that resources or mineral resources that are extracted from the rest of the country, they could make use of these facilities that are already there. I'm not a believer of duplicated initiatives. Maybe at East Africa, we need to rethink the strategy around the establishment of smelting centers for the purpose of, again, I don't know, value addition and mechanisms. Gender. Gender is very critical.
Rachel, never wind up.
Oh, okay. Gender is very critical, and I think it needs more dialogue. I applaud TLS for the efforts, but I think the biggest question is, at what angle do we address gender? For me, it's more about 3 things: participation, legitimacy, and the representation. For them to be able to have an effective inclusion and empowerment, I think we cannot leave these things out. When I talk about participation, to what extent women are involved in the value chain, whether it's through direct extraction or the value chain. When you talk about representation, at what point or at what % are women represented across different decision-making bodies? This is something that we need to look at. But also participation, dialogue. How many women are involved in the dialogue? Again, it's something we have to reassess. I know efforts are there and we as stakeholders are trying our best, but we need a collective and affirmative action to ensure participation, representation, and legitimacy of women in the extractive sector makes sense, and it should go beyond gender-based violences. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for that comprehensive, shall I say, outlook and discussion on everything that has been presented in the course of the day. Matters of East Africa integration are very sensitive, I must say. There was a time we were hearing that East Africa community will be a coalition of the willing. But so those who will be willing to embrace solutions towards climate change will work together towards addressing them. But unfortunately, this very infamous saying is not supported by the structures of the decision making within the EAC. I say that because also as an advocate, I've participated in the East Africa Law Society as member of the governing council. I understand the levels of decision making, from the IALA to the country's endorsement of whatever has been discussed at IALA level. So it is tricky, but from my point of view, climate change is, you can't afford not to deal with it. Either you prepare or you perish with time, regardless of the country's priorities at the time. It's something that ultimately it has to be addressed. But I hear you, and your contribution is significant. I know it is also supporting the previous speakers in terms of everything being contextual. What are the priorities in East Africa? Are priorities similar or not? And how do we harmonize that towards the common good and common goal? So thank you, Rachel. I had Isakwisa's hand. Isakwisa, are you with us? Please take the floor. And maybe just a point of, order. We will not have the breakout session from 4 to 4:45 because the topic there is also enshrined in the discussions tomorrow. So a lot of that will be dealt with in the course of the day tomorrow. So we will pass that. So we will have maybe 15 more minutes of Q&A contributions, and then we will agree whether we want to have coffee outside or have the rapporteur give takeaway for the day before we close the day. So Isakwisa, karibu.
Okay, asante. I'll have at least 2 or 3 things to react to, or also share with the rest of the group. First, it relates to the gentleman's reaction this afternoon. And, I was a bit intrigued by his reaction on his comments regarding the presence of a lot of policies and legislations, but without them really having an impact at the community level. And this also closely connects to the question which one of somebody posed here, that in preparation of these policies and laws, do we start preparing them from the high level and cascading them down to the local level? Or do we start by having discussions at the local level, then bring them up to the high level so that we now proceed with the preparation of the policies and legislations? Now, it's quite a challenging question, but I think when you look at it from a deeper angle, you discover that you always have to have a starting point about something. You have to have a starting point about something, and there's no wrong in doing that. So the presence of having numerous policies and laws is a positive thing. It is just one step ahead towards addressing the challenges we have. The second part of it then would be, how then do we translate them and implement them? And I can say that it's not that what we have is all in vain. No. The policies and legislations that we have as far as climate change is concerned and other environmental problems are concerned have really brought a fundamental change in trying to address these problems. As from the national level, we have seen this paradigm change as a result of the laws and policies we have been putting in place. Right now, we have, for instance, I can give an example. We have what we call the carbon trading. And before we came with the carbon trading guideline, people were willing to invest in carbon trading in Tanzania, but they were telling us, you see, we can't invest in carbon trading because we don't know how we'll be able to assess the credits, how we'll be able to calculate, the carbon credits and, make them reach the international markets, because we don't have anything that guides us in. So the country went quite fast in trying to come up with a guideline for that. And before we thought probably that, this is a big initiative and probably we won't have, we are far from being able to do such kind of business. But immediately we came up with the guideline, then we saw the private sector venturing into that quite very fast. And now we're in the process of trying to see whether we can, even put it into legislation so that we could properly regulate carbon trading. When you look at other factors, for instance, that also contribute to climate change in terms of forestry, etc., we have the Forest Act, which helps us in treating problems within the forest sector, in cutting of trees and that. And we have a lot of culprits who have been cutting trees sensibly without permits, etc. And also that act has enabled us to go into afforestation practices and it's helpful. So it's quite easy to sit and speak about these things, but when you go through and go into the legal documents and see the reports of how these laws are really helping us, you'll find out that they're quite positive. But again, we do accept that we do acknowledge that there's still some gaps which need to be filled, but that can be done in due course. The second thing is about, we noted that we don't have a climate change policy. And that came out of trying to assessing where we are as far as implementing all those other strategies and policies that we had. And we said, no, we still need something far much bigger than what we have to be able to tackle the climate change problem. Now, this has raised another question, that if we come up with a policy, then do we need a specific law on climate change? That's another discussion which is now coming up. And as Baraka said, he reviewed the Environment Management Act and he found that there was one section only which was addressing climate change. But when you look at it from how our legal environmental framework is structured in the country, you'll discover that most environmental issues are addressed in sector laws. So we have the Environment Management Act just as a guiding. This just provides what should be done and who should do it. So when you read the Act, you'll see that the Act gives, for instance, mandates to the forest sector to do certain actions in climate change and things like that, to the water sector, to the agriculture sector, and henceforth. Now, if you go to these specific laws, that's where you'll see what exactly is being done in dealing with these kind of problems. So, if these matters have been taken to sector policies and laws, then is it high time that now we come up with a law which will bring them back into a single legislation and regulate it from a single legislation? Will that really work for us? Or should we continue to leave these functions within other sectors' laws? That's a question in which we are debating about right now. And probably your insights on this could help us moving forward. Thank you.
Okay, asante. Mimi siwasilishi hoja, ila nina swali kidogo kwa mazingira. Mimi sio mtaalamu wa mazingira, lakini unapotizama mara nyingi ripoti nyingi kama wanatizama kama wapinzani, na ndio maana mara nyingi miradi inafanyika na ripoti hazitoki, lakini mradi unaendelea. Sasa niwaulize watu wa mazingira, yani inakuwaje kwa ile ripoti huwa mara nyingi zinakuwa na upinzani mkubwa sana? Je, huwa si ushirikishi au huwa tatizo liko wapi? Mfano Mr. Sakwisa na engineer hamjatuambia ni kwa nini ripoti nyingi zikitolewa zinakuwa zina upinzani mwingi na zinaleta mtafaruku sana. Shida huwa iko wapi? Je, shida ni sheria? Shida ni ninyi wataalamu wa mazingira au shida huwa iko wapi? Asante. Hoja yangu.
Asante. Na swali hapa limekuwa posed, napenda kuliaddress kwa nani? Okay, engineer is not in the room, I believe. But Mr. Isakwisa, the question has been addressed to you, considering you're one of the presenters that is left in the room. Maybe you can respond.
Hello. Yeah. Kama taarifa zinatoka na watu wana react, hicho ni kitu kizuri. Ni kitu kizuri. Sidhani kama kina ubaya wowote. Kwa sababu katika masuala yote hata ukiangalia watu wanaoandika wanaandika publication, wanaweka online kwenye online journal na nini. Mwingine anasoma, mwingine anaweza kuandika kumcritique kwamba hapana, hichi kitakiwa kufanyika hivi. Na hivyo ndio kwa elimu inapotokea na knowledge. Kwa hiyo challenge a report, it's something which is healthy. Ni kitu ambacho tunatakiwa kuencourage. Hatutaki report ambazo zinatoka alafu tuna kila upatie certain wazo lingine kuhusu report. Hapana. Changamoto hizo ukizana huko ndo kuna kutujenga zaidi. Kama tulikosea mahali ndo tunajua tulikosea hapa. Tunapoenda mbele tunajifunza zaidi na tunarekebisha. Kwa hiyo vitu kama hivyo ni vizuri. Nafikiri tumeelewana.
Muuliza swali umeridhika?
Asante, nashukuru kwa majibu yako. Ni sawa, kwa maana kwamba lengo la ripoti ni kusaidia jamii. Mfano, mimi nimetoa ripoti, nikasema labda kitu hiki kifanyika ni vibaya, lakini ile ripoti baadaye inakaa kwenye makabati. Msajili amesema hasionagi hizo ripoti. Kwa hiyo maana yake ripoti zinakuwa kwenye makabati, ila wale wadau ambao sasa kama sisi ambao si wataalamu wa mazingira tunakuwa kwenye dilema. Upande mmoja unakuta huku, upande mwingine unakuta huku. Ila ripoti inasema iko kwenye makabati. Sasa sisi ambao si wataalamu wa mazingira sasa inakuaje pale? Ule mvutano, mradi unaendelea, mvutano upo, wahanga sisi ambao si wataalamu wa mazingira. Yaani tunakuwa tuko kwenye dilema.
Ripoti, kuna ripoti za aina nyingi kuhusu mazingira, zipo nyingi tu, na hamna ripoti ambazo ni siri. Kwa mfano kama ni ripoti za EIA, custodian wa ripoti za EIA tunazifahamu, na sheria pia imetoa utaratibu kama unataka kupata hiyo ripoti unafanyaje. Tatizo ambalo lipo na ambalo ni ugonjwa labda ni wa taifa, sisi tumezoea kulalamika sana kuliko kuweka juhudi zetu katika kutafuta solutions. Na mimi nimekuwa katika sekta hii kwa takriban miaka 14 sasa, na nimeshiriki kwa mfano katika program nyingi sana za kujengea watu uelewa. Na nitakupa mfano mchache. Kuna watu ambao katika training labda za masuala ya sheria za mazingira, tumewaita kwenye zile training, labda ni afisa mazingira. Unakuta katika labda miaka 2-3 huyo afisa mazingira umemtrain na ametokea katika trainings. Lakini kuna siku afisa mazingira huyo atakuja atakwambia bana, mimi bana kanuni fulani ya mazingira sijawahi kuiona. Na huku kwa hizo training ambazo amekuwa kuja mnampa makabarasha ambayo yana hizo kanuni na sheria. Sijui tunaelewana. Mmempa makarabasha na kanuni na sheria, lakini kuna siku atakuja atakwambia mimi sijawahi kuziona. Ni kwa sababu tu huyu mtu hakuwa serious. Hakuwa serious. Na hili tatizo tunalo sana, hasa hata wataalamu wengi tu katika serikali. Ipo hiyo changamoto. Kuna watu ambao wao akishapata ile knowledge anakaa nayo, hajishughulishi kutafuta knowledge zaidi. Kwa hiyo kama ni changamoto za mazingira na unataka ripoti fulani, tafuta namna ambayo unajua ndio utaratibu wa kupata hiyo ripoti. Hakuna mtu atakaa huko sijui kutoka wapi kutafuta wewe kupatia hiyo ripoti. Hapana. Kama unajua ni EIA, unajua custodian wa ripoti za EIA ziko wapi. Kama ni taarifa za tathmini mbalimbali zingine kama strategic environmental assessment, unajua custodian wake iko wapi. Kama ni ripoti hizi za taarifa za hali ya mazingira, kwa mfano kuna hiyo taarifa niliyosema 2019 ipo na ni public document, na zingine hata ukiingia kwenye mtandao zipo. Lakini mwingine anasema anataka kwamba hiyo ripoti kitoka basi serikali ihakikishe kwamba ina publish nakala kila mahali na ihakikishe kwamba inapeleka mpaka kila mtu aipate. Sasa uwezo huo unakuwa mgumu, lakini ripoti zipo, ukienda online utazipata, ukienda kwenye ofisi husika za kuzipata hizo taarifa utapata, ili mradi tu unafuata taratibu wa kupata zile ripoti.
Asante. There's a contribution from that angle. Karibu.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Isakwisa asked one question as to whether we shall need to have a specific law to provide for climate change, given that even as of now we do not have a climate change policy. From the presenter, I don't recall the name, she said when you want to legislate on a certain law, first you have to ensure on how that particular law will be implemented. So if you have a myriad of laws, even implementation becomes a challenge. So I think once we get a policy on climate change, it will be a good idea to have, the policy should inform what the law, the basic law should contain, so that monitoring becomes easy. But if you have so many laws, everyone has been given mandate, you cannot monitor. That will become a challenge. And I think having a clear law, then I think things must land smooth. That's what my idea.
Thank you. Do we have any other contribution, or shall we invite the rapporteur to give few key takeaways from the day. Okay, thank you for the reminder. I need to discharge the panel that was leading in the discussion. Apologies, Mr. Luende. I sat far from you and I got detached. So thank you for your contribution. Unless you have anything to add? Final comment for 1 minute.
Unless you also want to say something. But I think I have 2 or 3 things to clarify. One, we're not saying the laws and policies established, the long list we have, is rubbish or they're useless. No, no, no. We are saying we should just balance. It's good to have laws and policies as much as you can. We need to help people to change their behaviors as well. And we need to balance the policy and practices. So we're not saying the list is bad to have. No, no, no. It's not the case. It's not the case at all. And we are saying we have been on the ground. We have seen things not happening on the ground. Yeah? So we are emphasizing that maybe our colleagues from Canada, if they hear these particular gaps, they might think of working with TLS and see how we can go and address those situations. Because defending that things are very much okay, we are so much successful, it won't help us. We don't have, in the area that we visited, we don't have village conciliation committees. We are not saying the legal frameworks for land rights and whatever is in shambles. No. At certain level, things are okay. In the village level, things are not okay. So we need to have a program in terms of climate change, perhaps, or somewhere in terms of environment, to go and strengthen these particular institutions of governance. Because the matter is governance. And the people are there, but they don't have the capacity to perform. So we need to nurse them, we need to give them capacity. The case studies from Geita is vivid. There were no input to their issues in terms of knowledge and skills. But today they're giving us good news. So we also want to hear good news after another 5 years from these village assemblies, village committees. They need to come here and testify that after the project, we are now being able to handle conflicts and land-related conflicts, and we are able to handle environmental-related conflicts, and of course, climate change. Lecho has just left, and I think she said we have not touched issues of gender, but I think we have really touched the issues of gender. The issue is maybe how do we relate gender to, or what noise, or what kind of message you want to sink in the head. For example, Madame talked about gender, and yesterday I think Paulina talked about gender in her presentation. But I think we have a problem of wanting to hear some messages to do with gender. There are specific messages that we want to hear in terms of gender extractive. For example, what I said, in terms of gender, there are dimensions of maternal health, dimensions of business, dimensions of empowerment. These are dimensions of gender. We should need to address them holistically. It's not only about training of GBV, that a woman is being beaten up. There's sexual harassment. It's about human rights. No, we have to look at it in a big picture. Our context in terms of gender is different from the context in Canada. In terms of women who are in the process of delivering in Canada, you correct me if I'm wrong, maybe in 1,000 women, maybe 4 or 5 will need special attention from a doctor, a specialist will come there. But in Tanzania, half of that number, maybe, they will need damu salama kutoka Bugando, watasafiri na vipi kutoka hapa. Hiyo ni gender issue, sio tu kupigwa, mwanamke kapigwa, hata umiliki wa ardhi, conflicts za ardhi. Ukienda kule Nyarugusu, conflicts za ardhi ni baba alikuwa ameoa, alafu akaoa tena. Sasa kuna mgawanyo wa mali, mgogoro unaanza. Mpaka wangu ulikuwa umeishi hapo. Yaani mpaka ule ulipokaa, unaona kuna nini ile katani. Imeenda hivi, ikakata kwenye ikarudi vile. Alafu asema, hii tuisuluhisha na balozi. Sasa unaona? Kwa hivyo tunasema issue ya gender, kama nilivyosema mapema na unakumbuka, tuweke kwenye context, tutaona mengine mengi. Siku moja nilikuwa Kahama naongea na wananchi, wanasema ukinaambia climate change na nini wengine Kiswahili chake, mabadiliko ya tabia nchi, wakanishangaa kweli kweli. Lakini in the discussion Nikawasikia mmoja anasema mvua mwaka huu zimechenga. Hiyo. Nikawaambia hiyo sikilizeni kwa makini. Anasema mvua mwaka huu zimechenga. Hiyo ndiyo tafsiri yake ya climate change. Ukimsimulia mabadiliko ya tabia nchi, sasa hii nchi ina matabia. Tabia zinakuwaje? Unajua? Kwa hiyo tukipeka kwenye context inakuwa rahisi zaidi. Ukisema mtu mvua zimechenga mwaka huu, rahisi kukuelewa kuliko ukimwambia habari zingine. Kwa hiyo tukibalance policy, practices, behavior, tutaondoka kirahisi zaidi. Asante.
Thank you. Balance. You are heard loud and clear. So thank you, Mr. Lohende, Miss Laura, not Miss, Mrs. Miss Laura and Miss Valeriana Makonda for your contribution. You are discharged.
Thank you.
Thank you. And on this note, I like to welcome our rapporteur for the day. She can just give us, the next session was recap and setting stage for day 2. We will have that and set the stage and then go have our coffee and wrap up the day. So as soon as she's done, you will be officially invited for coffee and you will be discharged for the day. So I welcome you to give a brief recap of the key points that you took away as a discussion for the day. Welcome. You want to go up there? You're fine there. Okay.
All right. So we began our session by opening remarks by the CEO of the Tanganyika Law Society and the CIRID project coordinator. Thereafter, we had an overview of results since project implementation, and we had a very detailed slide of all the activities that have been conducted, including trainings of lawyers and the training of community champions, plus community awareness programs. After that, we had presentations by project stakeholders on their experiences and the lessons that they had learned throughout the project implementation. And I think one of the things that was very moving in these presentations by the stakeholders was the manner in which the project had an impact on them beyond their roles at institutional level, but we all heard how each one of them, their lives were impacted at a very personal level, some of them actually even being attracted and being more passionate towards educating themselves on matters of natural resources, extractive sector, and protection of human rights in terms of the extractive industry. We also had presentations by women community champions, and we had a government representative, a councillor from Gator region, and this was also very good as it brought the project implementation, its practicability from the grassroots level. After those presentations, we had a plenary discussion and an analysis of how the project has had a comparative advantage, and we were looking on how to leverage those advantages as we head to the close of the project. Among the successes that were discussed included an increase in capacity building of women, and also at communal level, the decision-making processes of members of the community on matters that affect them in terms of the extractive activities that were being conducted. And we also looked at the economic empowerment of women as they were more involved in the extractive activities. We heard from both beneficiaries and project stakeholders. There were also some clarifications which were required in terms of certain areas of the law, including challenges that still exist on the ground. For example, some of the challenges that were addressed is the insufficient capital of small-scale miners. We also needed clarification on who is a small-scale miner and an artisanal miner. And some of the challenges also included health and safety issues, including issues of personal gear and costs for mining licenses. And we had a representative from the government who was explaining the role of the government, whereby there is the role of the government, and the government will also will assist in some of the areas, but also these miners need to have their own capacity in engaging in business like any other business. We also looked at practical ways for sustainability on the programs that have been conducted so far through the project. Like one of the issues that was discussed is how to continue the toll-free line, and there was advice that was given on how to engage with the police. We have the gender desk department and how that can also be utilized in assisting the continuation of some of these activities. And from there on, so we had a session on setting the roadmap. Ms. Jennifer discussed the priorities for the remaining project time and looked at the work plan for the remaining approximately 9 months which are left for the project implementation and what needs to be prioritized, whereby Ms. Selina discussed on climate transition for mining communities. The next session had to do with the role of sustainable communities in addressing climate change, and we looked at Tanzania, and then we also looked at the East African context. And finally, we had this final discussion whereby the main issues that were discussed was increasing participation of women in policy and decision-making processes, and harmonizing government policies at local and regional levels for efficient implementation of climate laws and policies. So some of the issues were already wrapped up by our moderator, but this was just a brief highlight on some of the key points that we have addressed throughout this day. And thank you all for your participation.
Yes, you just missed the recap for the day. Thank you very much for that. I hope you are listening